Pictures or words. So let's say I'm talking about a shuttle. I can talk about the length, the wingspan, I can talk about the empty weight, I can talk about here's what the tail section should look like, and I can go on and on and on and fill up all your minds with these details. This is not aesthetically pleasing, and it's not going to do the group any good. Unless you're copying down notes frantically, it's just words. It's much better to bring up a picture like this, and then you can say, this is the cockpit, this is whatever terminal, that kind of stuff. You don't need the words up there as you're telling, you're explaining. That's what you're here for. And the picture gives a better sense of what you're talking about as opposed to all the words on the screen. Rule of 10. Yes, that is intentionally left blank. Sometimes it's a good idea in your presentations to leave a slide blank. Not often, and you have to know what you're doing, but sometimes leaving a blank slide clears the air, it gives a sense of separation between what you're doing, and it also allows you to talk without anybody having to concentrate on there. They get their entire focus dedicated on you, and they're paying attention entirely. Unless they like looking at big screens, or whatever color you choose. 11, transitions. For some reason, every person who does presentations in primary or high school or even getting into university loves transitions. Transitions 99.9% of the time are not needed and are not useful. The only time you should really use translations is if you want to bring in points and emphasize them. So you have a list, you want to bring in point by point as you click, that's good. Usually you should also only use that if you have a clicker. Standing here and going like this is not necessarily always the best idea. Also, it just doesn't necessarily look professional there. It's just how it looks. So, now I'm going to get into eye basics. This has to do with color selection, color choice, and other stuff for your presentation. So the basic idea is the eye is made of cones and rods. Rods allow you to see in dark, they're white and black only, and cones allow us to see colors. So of the cones in your eye, there's more red than green or blue. But because of the strength of the light, they average out to be about even. The basics of the eye, so as you can see, there's the cornea, light goes through on the lens, it's inverted, and back here on the back of the eye is where all the cones and rods are. That's about all you really need to know of the basics of the eye. And not to click on high-quality pictures. Okay, rule 12, color blindness. Happens more in males than females, but there is a certain number of people that are colorblind, and there's various scales of color blindness. Now, taking that into effect, you can pretty much assume that in a crowd this size, somebody here is probably colorblind, or is at least partly colorblind. Things to know about charts. There's certain colors in charts, and often it's better to have textures as opposed to colors in charts, so people can tell the difference. Also, you have two similar colors, it's hard to say. Backgrounds. I'm going to show you in a minute some different backgrounds and why colors are not good for non-colorblind people, but also for colorblind people. If you have colors that are similar, they often can't see the difference, and it just looks like a nice white side or a nice blue or green side to them. And the last is text color for the same reason. So, blue on red. People love dark blue sides. If you look around, many presentations use a dark blue or a dark light gray slide, and they often choose different colors for contrast. Red, of course, like blue and red. Red is the opposite of blue, so we should use it. And as you can see, the red does show up, but it makes the entire slide look very dim. Both the red and the blue are playing off the eye and not making it look very bright. You can go the opposite way, and the problem is here. We have more red receptors in our eyes than blue. And as I said before, because of the intensity of blue, it plays off and allows you to see blue about evenly. However, there's so much red on a presentation like this that it overwhelms and gives people headaches when they're trying to read the blue text. I'll give you a second to take a look, but you can see what I mean. Next, shading. People like shades in their text. And you can read the top text, you can read the bottom text. But there's this area right in the middle where, because of how gray works with yellow coloring, the text almost becomes invisible and you can't really read it anymore. This works in other shadings and that kind of stuff, but in general, if you're doing shading, make it very simple, bottom right, bottom left, or off to the side where it won't necessarily affect the text, and keep your text often either the same color as the shading so that you know it yourself, or not a color that, as you can see, horribly contrasts with it. And that's my brief presentation. Any questions? Yep.
How do you feel about hand gestures and walking around and body language like that? I know you said no swaying, but what about some of the other body language?
So, hand gestures, it's natural for a lot of people to sway a hand gesture and that kind of stuff. It does add a certain emphasis. It doesn't hurt any presentations. In fact, most people find that if you know your thing, you gesture automatically to try and give more emphasis. Walking back and forth, as I said, especially if you're doing a film presentation, but any presentation, essentially you have your presentation on it, you don't want to walk in front of it, partly because it blocks the view and because you're blind yourself, and usually limited to a very section then. So what you're essentially doing is pacing back and forth like this, and unless you're in a jail cell, your 8 foot by 8 foot march back and forth is going to look more like you're nervous and don't know what you're saying, rather than simply pacing to give yourself thought. So, I mean, it does work with certain people. Some people can go back and forth as you're talking to one side of the class and be going over here to talk about something else. But in general, if you're not, especially if you're not particularly good at presentations, it's probably not a good idea to start pacing. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.